The Christian music industry is destroying corporate worship. Okay, maybe it's not quite that bad. I actually think that there's a lot of good things about the Christian music industry as well, which I will talk about in a video next week. I'm going to link that down in the description below. So before you flame me in the comments, watch both videos, please. I actually believe that there's a lot of good things about the Christian music industry, but I also believe that there are a few negative side effects of the Christian music industry that we need to be aware of, so that we can avoid the temptation of these negative things about the Christian music industry and lean in to the good things about what is happening in the Christian music industry right now. And that way, as it turns out, we can learn that the Christian music industry is a much better net good on the life of our corporate worship and our worship life in the church than it is a negative. So if we recognize the few negative things, we can actually avoid them and raise up the positive things. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the negative side of things. Next week, depending on whenever you're watching this, it might already be out. We'll talk about the positive things and how to lean into those things. Now, one of the problems with the Christian music industry that we need to be really careful about avoiding, or it will ruin our corporate worship, is that the Christian music industry, I think, is designed primarily around personal worship. And so what we do is, a lot of people don't know the difference between personal worship and corporate worship. And so we bring that idea, that subconscious idea that we haven't even identified of personal worship, we bring that into the corporate worship setting. And what has happened is that as we've brought that into our gathering, for people attending the congregation that we are leading on Sunday mornings, they're coming in with this idea that it is just about us on Sunday morning. I don't need to worry about the people beside me because I've listened to Christian radio by myself in my car for however long, and that is worship. And then Sunday morning is, I just get to do that with a bunch of other people in the same room. I get to have my own personal time of worship at church, but I get to have it in the same room as other people. So that's one thing that it's done, but for worship leaders who have been molded by that idea as well, that means that we, on Sunday mornings, lead personal times of worship, and we kind of view it like we are the radio or Spotify or whatever people listen to these days, some streaming service. We are the streaming service, and maybe we're a little bit more tailored to the people in front of us, but we're still just facilitating these personal worship moments between people and God, and not between people, not between a person and the other people in the church, and then to God. There is a vertical aspect to corporate worship. There's also a horizontal aspect to corporate worship. When you listen to a song on your favorite streaming platform, it is just a vertical response. It's just between you and God because you're probably by yourself whenever you're listening to it and worshiping along to it. Now, I think something in the Christian music industry that perpetuates this idea of personal worship, and it's not really the fault of the Christian music industry, it's just any music industry, is that music, at least mass marketed music, is designed to be enjoyed by ourselves. Like, I know that there are concerts and we get together for music sometimes, but over the years, music has become more personalized, and now instead of going to a concert hall to listen to it with a bunch of people, now we went from that to, we shrunk it down to the radio, where we would just listen to it with our families in our living rooms. From the radio, we went to records, and what happened at records? Well, now instead of just listening to whatever everybody else listening to that radio station was listening to, now you pick your own music and you can hear it for yourself, and you're probably still listening to it with other people, but now it has become a personal decision. Fast forward even more, then we have headphones, then we have Apple AirPods, and you have them in your ear, and it's just you listening to whatever song you want because you have a streaming platform of a billion songs that you can listen to. That is what not just the Christian music industry, but the music industry in general has turned into. It's personal, right? Like, we just got our headphones in and we're listening to whatever we want. And that's important to realize, because that means that music now is created, not all the time, but a lot of the time, to be enjoyed personally. And I think that that's true in the Christian music industry, and that doesn't mean that songs that were created to be enjoyed personally are bad. It just means that those songs, probably a lot of them, aren't appropriate for corporate worship, where we're supposed to be worshiping together. And so this is why I have a problem when somebody says to me, hey, I heard this song on the radio and it's a great song. It allows me to worship whenever I'm, driving in my car, or whatever they would say. And then I listen to the song, and it is like this personal worship song that maybe tells a story about something, or maybe uses the words I a lot in it, and it's about me, me, me. And those songs aren't bad for personal worship time. But when it comes to the corporate worship setting, we're supposed to be worshiping together. And so personal worship songs might not always work in a corporate setting. But the music industry, and by association, the Christian music industry, has probably put out more personal worship songs than they have corporate worship songs, because there are more people who want personal worship songs than want corporate worship songs. At least that's what they think they want, even though they probably need more corporate worship songs. So all of that to say, the Christian music industry has played a part in confusing our understanding of personal worship, and has led us away from more corporate worship, even when we're gathering together on Sunday mornings. Another sneaky thing that the Christian music industry has done, not on purpose, but it has done it, and it's actually more the people listening to Christian music from the Christian music industry, is that it has created unrealistic standards for our worship team. And what people want on a Sunday morning is they want to walk, and this isn't true for everybody, but I'll make a generalization here. People want to come into church on Sunday and see a full band on stage, and they want there to be 2 electric guitarists and a drummer and a bass player and a hot worship leader and a keyboard player and tracks running in the background. I'm just kidding about the hot worship leader, but they come in, and if they don't say that they want that, I think the temptation is to think that worship will be better if there is a fuller sound, because that's what I hear on the radio. That's how I worship in my personal time, or when I go to Christian concerts, I see a full band and they have a bunch of tracks on stage. And so I feel like the temptation is that not only is it an unrealistic standard for a lot of smaller churches to expect them to have a full worship team with people who serve every single Sunday, but the temptation is also there for us as worshipers to think that worship or worship experience will be better if there are more people in the band. If there is a fuller sound, it will help me engage in worship more. If I only had a full drum set instead of a cajon, man, that would make worship a little bit better. I know there's only one person singing on your team right now, but if you could add a harmony part to that, some background singer, that would make our time of worship so much better. And so what I'm trying to say is, because the quality of the Christian music industry music is so high, we associate that quality with the quality of our worship. And that's obviously, if we look at that at face value, we know right away that that's not how it works. And we should be able to worship just as much to a full band as to a person with just an acoustic guitar, because it's not about the quality. At that point, it's not even about quality, right? It's just about the fullness of the sound, because this person over here with an acoustic guitar could be an amazing acoustic guitarist and singer, and yet we'd still want more, because we think that the fullness of the sound contributes to our worship, because there's an emotional response when we have pads playing in the background and 4 to the floor drum beat, right? It stirs something up in us. And so this, I guess, isn't really a problem with the Christian music industry. It's just a byproduct of it, which is what I'm saying mostly in this video, is that it is our response as a church to the Christian music industry that is ruining corporate worship. So if you are in the church and you listen to Christian music regularly, do not associate the fullness of sound sonically or even the quality of sound from professional musicians with the quality of your worship. You can worship just as much at a worship conference, at the Passion Worship Conference, as you can in your local church with that 65-year-old guy who's playing the acoustic guitar. The third thing the Christian music industry is tempting us to do to ruin our corporate worship time is that it has tempted us to follow trends instead of following the culture of our own church. As technology has allowed us to communicate and interact with more and more people, the world as a whole, I think, has shrunk in our ideas and in our culture of the world. Like, there are still differences between the cultures in the world, but I think that especially in America, like it seems strange to me that for the most part, and I'll speak for America because I'm from America, it seems strange to me that I could be in a church in rural Pennsylvania and I could go to Colorado and find like the same exact church over there, singing the same exact songs. And like pretty much go to any state, any location, and find a church that looks eerily similar to the church that I attend regularly on Sundays. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the point that I want us to understand from that is that your church is unique to wherever you live. The people in your church are unique. They have specific needs. They have specific truths about God in the specific seasons that they're in their lives that they need to hear. You have a specific culture of just your general area. And so when we see in the Christian music industry these larger churches, which I don't have anything against larger churches, I'm just saying that they have more influence than the smaller churches. So we see these larger churches and we see the way that they do things, and they're doing, for the most part, I think, the right thing in the context that they're serving in, but we aren't serving in that context. And so when we see that, especially from the Christian music industry, which I think can become an idol sometimes, when we see those larger churches, we idolize them and we want to become like them. When we take what they're doing and we put it in our church, sometimes it's not the right thing because you're taking something from one very specific context, putting it into your context. You're taking something from a big city church, putting it in a rural church, and your church doesn't need that specific thing because you put it into the wrong context. And that means that worship leaders are chasing the trends of the day, looking for the next best thing. They're part of Facebook groups. They're always watching the newest worship videos that comes out on YouTube, and they're seeing how people are doing things, and they're trying to replicate it in their church, and they don't need to because what you're looking at doesn't fit the context of your church, and it is ruining corporate worship because our corporate worship has become general instead of specific to the people in our church. So this isn't as much a problem with the Christian music industry itself. It's just a byproduct of it that we as worship leaders and leaders in the church have been chasing trends instead of understanding the culture that we live in with the people in our church and speaking directly to them. How about this way that the Christian music industry is ruining corporate worship? There are two parts, I think, to our worship service. And I'll quote Craig Groeschel in a second. But the two parts are, there should be comfort and there should be conviction. We should be comforted by the truths that we hear on Sunday. We should also be convicted by the truths that we hear on Sunday. Craig Groeschel says it this way, and I just heard this recently, but I love it. He said, as your pastor, I am called to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. I am called to comfort the afflicted, to give them things that will make them feel the hope that God provides, but also to afflict the comforted, or the comfortable is probably what he said. And I think that the comfortable, whatever that means, is much more marketable than the convictable. I don't know if that's a word, but than the conviction. Comfort is more marketable than conviction, which means when it comes to the Christian music industry, we are going to have a bunch more songs that comfort us than do convict us. When is the last time you turned on the radio and you heard a song that convicted you? I'm thinking of the song Give Me Your Eyes by Matthew West. I don't know why that popped into my head. That's kind of a random song to think about, but I feel like that's like a convicting song, actually. Like, give me your eyes for just 1 second, give me your eyes so I can see everything that I've been missing. Something for humanity. And it's like, I haven't been seeing the things that I need to see, God. So I feel like that's a convicting song, but there are way more comforting songs where we hear these beautiful truths about God. And those are important, and I'm not discounting those. I'm just saying that the Christian music industry leans towards the comforting side and away from the convicting side, where we sing about maybe some harder truths. You know, I think of like the old hymns that you probably wouldn't hear on the radio that sing about hell. How many songs do you hear about hell on the radio that work that into a verse, right? No, it's just God loves you and he is for you and he's going to fight the battle for you. And 10 years before that, it was he was going to part the sea for you. And when you're out on the ocean, he's going to, protect you, right? Like we lean this way. And so I think that we're missing out on some of the conviction that we could have from hearing the hard truths about God in songs, and we probably aren't going to get them from the Christian music industry, at least the popular Christian music industry, because people don't want to hear that when they turn on the radio. Think about any Christian music station that you've ever listened to. What is their tagline? It's like Word FM. That's one in my area. Positive and uplifting. There's Air One, the positive alternative. And then, of course, there's K-Love, positive, encouraging, K-Love. It's always positive, encouraging, right? But it's never positive, encouraging, and sometimes convicting, right? We need all of this to grow in our faith. We can't just be comforted. We need to be convicted sometimes so that we can be sanctified. If we are in the process of sanctification, that means that we haven't reached the perfected state that God wants us to reach. That is being shaped into the image of his son, Jesus. We haven't reached that image yet, which means that there is still sin in us. There are still wrong things in us, and we need to be convicted of those things so that we can be shaped into the image of Jesus. And then perhaps the most obvious way that the Christian music industry is ruining corporate worship is that it perpetuates this idea that worship has become a music style and not a lifestyle. Worship is something that we listen to. Worship is something that we do when we sing together. Worship is easy because I can just turn on the music in my car and I'm worshiping. Boom, I'm worshiping. I turned on a Hillsong song or a Chris Tomlin song and boom, worship is happening right now. And worship has become a music style instead of a lifestyle. And to bring that into our corporate worship gatherings, that means that when we speak of worship, oftentimes we're speaking of the musical side of our gathering. We're just saying, like, if I am singing songs right now and praising God through music, then that is worship. But I don't know what giving is. I don't know what praying is. I don't know what reading the Word of God is or hearing my pastor preach is. That must be something else, but it's not worship, because worship is when we sing. And so just from a speaking vocabulary, sort of semantic perspective, worship has become music in our church, in a corporate worship gathering. And even beyond that, worship is something that we do when we come to church, or it's something that we do when we have music on in our car. But obviously Romans 12:1 tells us that worship is supposed to be a lifestyle. Present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your acceptable worship. This is your spiritual worship, to offer your body everything that you are, your entire life. Put it on the altar before God and offer it to him, not just in your song, but in everything that you do. And so when worship became synonymous with a musical genre, I think that it diminished the definition of what worship really is. And that is that worship is everything that we do in life that points to the worthiness of God. Now, like I said, I don't believe that the Christian music industry is inherently evil. I don't even believe that it's a little bit evil. I think that there are a lot of good things going on in the Christian music industry, and maybe you saw a lot of the things that I talked about today weren't actually problems with the Christian music industry itself, but it was problems with how we respond to what has happened in the Christian music industry. And it's only once we understand those things that are coming from our perception of the Christian music industry and ruining our corporate worship, it's only once we recognize them that we can lean away from them and lean in to the good side of the Christian music industry, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next video. If you're watching this in the future, it might already be out, so check out down in the description below. The Christian music industry is fueling our corporate worship. I also want to give you a free training to help you get on the right track in your corporate worship leading. So check out 5 tips to instantly improve your worship leading down in the description below. In that free audio training, I will show you 5 super simple things that you can do before this Sunday to improve your worship leading. They aren't hard to do. You just have to know them, and then you apply them, and then you will improve your worship leading, and it will help you lead a time of worship, an engaging time of worship with confidence. So check that out in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Till I see you in the next video. Keep leading worship well.